In response to some major environmental incidents in the 1970s, Congress passed the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, known by its acronym as CERCLA. Its nickname is Superfund. This was the act that created the multi-billion-dollar trust fund that the federal government can use to clean up environmental incidents of releases of hazardous substance into the environment, posing threats to human health and welfare. It gave Congress the authority to pursue the responsible parties, to compel them to clean up a release of hazardous substance to the environment, or if the federal government had to use the Superfund to clean it up itself, they could pursue recovery of their cost from the responsible parties. The CERCLA Act defines who can be held liable for cleaning up environmental contamination. If you look at the list, the number one person that can be held liable for the cost of environmental cleanups is the owner. So for that reason, if there was a property that looks as if it may be contaminated, or if it's known to be contaminated, no one wanted to become an owner of that property. So no one dared even touch any property that was perceived to be contaminated. Was a nest of copperheads. We all know what the delinquent industrial properties do to our communities. And the amendments to CERCLA defined the term brownfield. And it is defined as any property, the reuse, the redevelopment of which is made difficult by contamination or a perception of contamination. In 2008, South Carolina wrote amendments to the state Hazardous Waste Management Act to incorporate brownfields and the voluntary cleanup program into state law. The purpose was to enable and encourage the redevelopment of brownfields properties, and we provide very similar liability protections. What we're looking for is not for someone to come and clean up the property, but we're looking for a steward, long-term steward of this property, to be able to put it back into use, revitalize the area, get properties back on the tax rolls, get it into productive use while maintaining it safe for the use it's intended.
The Brownfields Loan Program actually was started around 15 years ago. As Robert mentioned, it was kicked off and has been sustained in great part with grant money from EPA. And at this point, the loan program is capitalized at about $6.5 million. Of that $6.5 million, there's about $2+ million currently unobligated available for lending for brownfields projects. And as Robert said, the fund can lend to government, to nonprofits, and to the business community. Again, it's money from our lending program for the cleanup phase of the project, not the assessment, not the rebuilding of something after the fact, but just the cleanup. But that's a very important component. You have to be what's called a non-responsible party. You can't be the folks that made the mess or contributed to the mess. Secondly, you have to have entered into a voluntary cleanup contract with DHEC before coming to the revolving loan fund to access funds. The interest rate that we're currently offering right now, it's anywhere from 1% to 3%, 10-year term. The focus of the revolving loan fund program is on hazardous materials. These are funds basically designed for the cleanup of the property itself. It's a little more complex than doing a straight commercial loan. It's less complex than doing a bond. So that's why it only makes sense, really, if you're borrowing $200,000 and up, that this becomes a very viable option.
Greenville has had an excellent program over the years. The city received their latest brownfield assessment grant, and it actually started in October and will run through September of 2017. That funding is $400,000, and that funding is available for the assessment of brownfield sites, and assessments could be Phase 1 environmental assessments, Phase 2 assessments, which Phase 2 is your actual soil and groundwater sampling of sites. It could also cover asbestos, lead-based paint surveys, and then also it will get into the cleanup planning of sites. The city's brownfield grant program will pretty much do everything but the cleanup. You guys probably are aware of a lot of the brownfield sites that have been redeveloped within the city, but in addition to the building here and the school, the Swamp Rabbit Trail was actually a property that came through the city's brownfield program. The lofts at Mills Mill, and then of course Floor Field and some of those surrounding sites as well were brownfield properties.